Special Operations, Covert Ops, Espionage, The Team House, with your hosts, Jack Murphy and David Park.
Thank God survived this encounter down on the Colombian border. You said you had another FID mission down to Colombia with 7th Group. When does this idea, or when do you even first hear that there's this secretive JSOC intelligence unit? I think especially at that time in the late 1990s, no one even knew these guys existed, really. When did this idea, or when did knowledge of this unit's existence even creep into your awareness, and what made you make that decision to kind of take the jump over?
There's something you just said that just jarred my memory, and I'm going to make a joke here probably to use. When I got hogtied by a bunch of Rangers on an abandoned airfield on a JSOC exercise. So, true story. So how I actually even came to understand what JSOC was, and even I didn't even know what the tiers would be. I didn't know any of that while in group. I think the only thing I participated in was at the SEER school, right? So they needed bodies. I think maybe they needed a little brown guy to play a part. I did go be like an extra at SEER school. There at Fort Bragg, and so I kind of saw a world that I wasn't aware of when I was a Marine, and definitely not while I was in MI or a SADE or in group. And then there's a couple of guys that came in, typical, came in the little blue blazers with gold buttons, and my dead sergeant tells me, "Hey man, you need to go report over here because they're doing a casting call interviews for an exercise." I'm like, "Oh, okay, cool." And then he's Spanish speaker, so there was something that they said that then I felt, all right, cool. I can be of use. And so I went through this interview process, and they made me talk. They made me read these lines, and essentially, ironically, I then end up playing a commander for a Latin American terrorist group for an exercise. So it's the first time I get to grow my beard. I get to, and as an intel guy, it was interesting because I could then go to the skiff, if you would, and then look this up. So I got to really rehearse rather than just being like somebody random that they got at group to play a character in one of these JRX exercises. And so I then, during that, the backside of being a target, so I was essentially the number 1 target or the number 2 target for this exercise. So JSOC brought everything to bear, and I got to see it from that perspective, right? I got to see it because I had my lines, and then I got to go to like the little talk where they're orchestrating. And then I remember this one guy, just kind of to your story of the hippie, in the mountains, he just looked different, right? This guy just carried himself different, long hair, that blue coat. It seems like he wore that everywhere, right? And he was just authoritative, just telling everybody, knew everything what he was doing and capabilities and assets and the boys. And I'm like, oh man, that guy's pretty cool. But then I get told to go off, and then they're going to capture me and have this little piece of paper on you. Don't say anything and talk on the radio. And subsequently, I didn't know what a direct action hit would be or a hostage. I didn't know what that would be. But I felt the fucking concussion grenades, right? And I then quickly learned backwards. I knew that they were assets because as at that time as just a SADE, there were capabilities at hand that didn't make sense to what I knew, right? As an E5 and a SADE, with SIG and gear or capabilities, I knew so much. But when this exercise was unfolding, I'm like, how the hell are these guys going to do that? Who the hell are these two? How are that? Right? Like, I was really inquisitive of how they were going to find me. And there was things being brought to bear that I had no idea. And obviously a guy with the blue blazer wouldn't tell me, till, at the dead of night, they found me. It happened to be in this one where the Rangers, and all due respect, those dudes came in, they stormed in, hogtied the crap out of me. I was still with the concussion, whatever they threw in there, and I'm hogtied. And finally, one guy finally found that little piece of paper. I'm like, dude, if you did all that to me, you better have found that SSC, right? You better have found that fucking thing. Other lesson learned. And so from that, when I went back and went through the debriefing, I talked to that one guy. He was a sergeant major at the time. He was a sergeant major. And then all I know was to the effect of, hey, guys are going to be coming in the months to be, just show up for the pitch, the recruiting pitch. And so I then went back and told somebody that was in charge of me. I was like, hey, I'm interested to do this between training and stuff like that. And I went, and then it was two guys that ended up being forever two of my greatest mentors, right? Just really quick, hopefully a lot of organizations, when they send folks to do the recruiting, you send your best of the best, because that impression lasts forever. And it was, in fact, it lasted forever. The guy that ran the exercise, or that aspect of the exercise, I would then work for him or know who he was. And then the two guys that came for recruiting. I don't remember much, but whatever they pitched, I wanted to do it, because I just remember being hogtied and all of that. So that mystique, again, I knew there was no videos, there was nothing. And then I applied, and they would basically said, here's a card, we'll call you, don't contact us. And then that's it. And then I went, and that's when I got shot and came back, and I was like, oh crap, I know I got to go through some selection process. And then at that point I had heard bits and pieces, but there was nothing being talked about at group. Right. Nothing. I want to say that there was one guy that was a former guy that came back. There were some incidents, unfortunately fatal, that I didn't know that this guy did come from somewhere, but he was pretty dinged up mentally, and I filed that later on, which is what I do now for a lot of the veteran suicide. After I got shot, came back, and then I knew I just needed to train, and then did end up getting that magical phone call. Hey, here's some information, show up, and you're going to go through your selection process.
What can you tell us about the selection process? Because I've had some conversations with people who actually said they had a good time at the selection course and thought it was a very challenging experience where they were kind of asked to think outside the box.
Yeah, for simplicity, that is, and Erick will just speak on his personal, which is going to probably quantify a lot of that. Every time I went through something, I knew more and more that that's where I wanted to be. Again, I never saw it in the Marine Corps. I never saw it at group. I didn't even read about it in a book, right? During that time, maybe I could have correlated it to a movie or something. It was every time something was done, I was just enamored by it. I was enamored by the preciseness, the timeliness, the exactness, the no feedback, right? The no feedback aspect of it. I don't know, might have been something from my childhood. It's just the way it was, right? And so it was hard. It was physically hard, mentally hard. I think it was the good piece. Very individual aspects of it, which I enjoyed. And then there was always that mystique, right? You start with so many, and then one day so many are gone, and then you keep on going down. And what that told you is, if you're going through all of this, you want to be part of an organization that has high standards, right? And so I remember that, and it's just the way things ran, the littleness. I was just attracted to that compartmentalization, to that mind challenging, to that. You're not going to figure it out, right? Nobody talked about it. Nobody knew. And the people that said some stuff, I remember in my class, you're just like, okay, you need to get chaptered out of the Army, because you're just talking wacky shit, right? Like, we're not here looking for aliens. Like, so it forever. I was, obviously really proud to have been selected. But many times in my career, and I think we talked about this earlier, as we transitioned into GWAT, and then as certain organizations changed in time, I would always revert back to selection as the core of why they select people. And that, in essence, is your selection is an indicator of what you may have to do, and the possibility. Because in those selections, you're going to be tested across the spectrum. And that spectrum is tied back to, obviously, an organization's requirements for the people that they need to do certain missions.
What do you think that core is that they're selecting for? Like, well, I guess I'm kind of asking that question of like, what is the quintessential operator? Which I know is kind of a broad and maybe unfair question in some ways. But what do you think that those qualities are?
The ability for ambiguity, right? The ability, and it's been said a million times, to live and think in the gray is very difficult. That ability, again, all due respect to everyone, but every Marine, every rifleman, every SEAL, every other operator, you may not have the mindset to take off and do what is needed, right? There, and Dave, you can relate to it, which is that, in the IC world, in the tradecraft world, is, hey, come back and fight another day, right? And they always, depending the old instructors from the old Cold War will tell you, don't be that ranger who has to take that hill. You might have to make that determination. You evaluated and you said, I will come back tomorrow. And a lot of, by DNA, if you would, the infantry people, the more of the special operations, dragger knuckles, knuckle draggers, are going to want to use that adrenaline. And so the type of people you need is that person who's able to think. Emotional intelligence, right? It is critical. That ability to go, nope, that compartmentalization, intelligence, to be smart, to thinking out of the box. Yes, those things. Those are key. And then there's things you're just not going to be comfortable, right? That a lot of people are going to be like, hey, I didn't join the military for that. Well, that's great. Thank you for your, we saw that a lot. Thank you for your patriotism. Continue. You're going to leave here and you're going to do great things, but this may not be for you. And because this world, we're actually not going to tell you about it. And so there aren't very many people that are going to go do something not being told, because you knew when you guys went to Ranger School, what Ranger School was about. You knew about SF, you knew about, probably the agency might be a little bit different, but everything in the military, but this world, no, because that's the type of world you're going to operate in. Right. And so singleton, 2, 3, 4, ambiguity. So that ability, really, it's simple to operate and be trusted. And so there's integrity is huge. Yeah. Your word is it. Yeah. And then, so your analytical process to process the information, not only as an individual, because you work in team and you're able to talk to each other, and then an analyst is going to take it, but it all starts with that trust. Did that guy really go do, did he self-assess? How many people really know to self-assess? Hey man, I'm hurt. Yeah. It was one thing to muscle through a long walk than to go, I may need to stop. It's okay for me to stop, because the mission I got to do tomorrow is going to take me 18 more hours to do. And then I don't know what's going to happen. So I need to have some reserves, right? So that hopefully that answers the mindset of it. And then the last one, and if I would, is, I mean, you got to be comfortable with being uncomfortable, right? Like you've seen some of the pictures, and there's. I mean, I'm not the only one that's done this, right? This can relate to guys doing other sort of intel work, which requires more of that mindset. But hey, you don't know what you're going to need to be tomorrow, and that can be in a variety of ways, which I think you'll probably cover on later on. But it starts there.
And it's interesting because one of the things you said is the ability to do what it takes. And I think a lot of people think, when they think of that, they think of like from a shooter perspective to kill a bad guy or to, take the shot. But sometimes it more like in a DEA scenario, it's like not taking down the bad guy, knowing they're doing harm, but waiting to collect on the bigger picture. Like that type of thing is hard for people to walk away from. It's like
tactical patience.
Yeah. It's so sometimes doing what it takes isn't like the gung ho. Yeah, I'm gonna sua sponte or just charge in here and blast this person. I'm okay with killing bad guys.
Leroy Jenkins.
It's living. Yeah, exactly. It's living in a much more kind of obscure world of, I know this person is actively hurting people, but it's not my job at this point to stop them from hurting these people, because there's a larger picture that's being taken in.
Yeah, you guys both said something, and again here, and now I'm fortunate that post processing, and when I went to NICO, the National Intrepid Center of Excellence for Traumatic Brain Injuries, it's generally here at in Walter Reed area, we get a lot of special operators that come that are 15, 20 years into career, and these guys are burnt out, and so the command sent them to this 1 month program. And so one of the key things about NICO and traumatic brain injuries and PTS, if you would, is based on triggers, right? And so when we did this exercise really quick on triggers, I was, it's going to kind of almost be like a joke. Like I was there with the SEAL, I was there with a guy from Fort Bragg, and I think there was another SF guy, and then there's me. And interestingly, and the SEAL came from the higher tier level. And their triggers in the mentality, again, nothing wrong with any of them, but it's just that by default, they're going to, their triggers are different than our triggers. Our triggers are very suppressed. If you bump into me, I'm just going to go away. If you hit my car downtown, the streets of Patientville, Haiti, I'm just going to keep on, because the mission's more important. You have to be able to control that adrenaline. And yes, I can pull out my gun and I can shoot him. And yes, I can pull out my knife. We can do all of that. But it is that emotional ability in those triggers. So when we did this exercise, all my triggers were different than theirs.
That's interesting.
Because my requirement was for us to be gray. And gray is not, that only cloak and dagger, but it's those emotions.
Right.
Like I'm not going to, if you, as you know this from a FISP perspective, Foreign Intelligence Service, someone is going to probe you. Well, a lot of these Marines, these wound up guys you're going to fail that test. You're going to show that you're an aggressor, where you have to be able to control that and just go, okay, I got something else that I got to protect.
So, Erick, you did get selected, of course, and I was wondering if we could take a moment here, because I know you're a bit of a student of the history behind it.